In today's episode, we're going to be talking about Ouija boards, demonic possession, and NASA. I wish I was kidding, because today we are going to talk about one of the most influential exorcisms of the 20th century. And if you like tales of the weird, supernatural, macabre, make sure to leave a like and hit that subscribe button. Because today we're going to talk about the exorcism of Roland. Our story begins in the faraway and magical land of Maryland, home of Old Bay crab seasoning, the band Clutch, that football team that I love watching beat the Steelers, and some sad poet guy that was obsessed with birds. In 1949, several newspaper articles started popping up around the Washington, D.C. area claiming that a local Maryland boy had recently received between 20 and 30 rites of exorcism in order to expel a demon that had been possessing him. And at this point, a lot of people didn't know what an exorcism was. It was a pretty obscure Catholic ritual. Not a whole lot of people knew about it. Now, at first, the family thought that they were just being haunted by a poltergeist because a lot of what they were experiencing was just general poltergeist activity. Stuff was moved around, furniture was shaking, there were disembodied noises like scratching and dripping sounds heard, just general poltergeist stuff. Eventually, the boy's family would take him to the hospital for observation. They would observe him, run all sorts of tests, and decide that there was nothing wrong with him, and send him back home. Neighbors in the area heard about some of the hauntings that were going on at the resident's house, so they offered to let the parents and the boy sleep overnight at their house in a non-haunted house. Unfortunately, the poltergeist activity seemed to follow the boy, and that's not good. That's suboptimal, because when an entity can follow someone from one place to another, that is known as a hitchhiker in the business. Hitchhikers, I've seen them in all aspects of supernatural activity. Ghost, cryptids, even like UFO activity tend to follow people around, and this kind of lends itself, a lot of these cases are considered more kind of mental health issues than actual supernatural phenomena, but other people witness this activity taking place. Furniture shaking, moving around, objects falling off the wall, and scratching and other disembodied noises being heard. So that's not great. It's at this point that the family decides to contact their local minister. He comes over to see what exactly is going on. You know, he hears the disembodied noises. He sees furniture moving around and stuff. He sees the deep scratches on the floor from where furniture has been moving around so much and so rapidly. So he devises a little bit of an experiment. He asks the parents if the boy can come over and stay the night at his house. Sure enough, when the boy starts to go to bed, lays down, the bed starts shaking, moving around, and noises start being heard, so he decides to make a makeshift sleeping bag out of just a pile of folded up blankets on the floor. Boy goes to sleep on it, and right as soon as he falls asleep, the minister witnesses this pile of blankets with the boy on top of it, like slithering around his floor like a snake, until it just slams the kid's head into a bedpost, waking him up, and the minister's racking his head trying to figure out what's going on here. The boy is trying to fall asleep. He's sitting in a chair with his knees up against his chest, and out of nowhere, the chair just tips over and sends this kid flying across the room, and the minister's just like, yep, I got nothing. Next morning, minister brings the boy back home to his parents and tells his parents, hey, you should probably contact a Catholic priest. They know a whole lot more about this stuff than I do. Also, at some point during all this, either during the initial meeting or the second meeting, a banana just flies from the top of the refrigerator across the room, and everyone just kind of sees it and is like, huh. Anyways, the family contacts a local priest, and the priest just tells them, look, if you think something's going on with your kid, take him to the hospital, and he kind of just shrugs the whole situation off. The family takes the boy to Georgetown University Hospital. They run all sorts of tests. They run all sorts of, observations and stuff. And that's when they contact the same priest and are like, you probably want to come see this. We don't really learn why from the article, but at this point, the boy and his family, they travel to St. Louis University Hospital. Again, the articles really don't make clear why. And it should be noted that both Georgetown University Hospital and St. Louis University Hospital are ran by the Jesuits. And here, after many more tests and much more observation, it is decided that whatever is going on with this child isn't mental and it's not physical, it's something else. Which means something has to be done outside the realm of normal medicine to deal with it. It's then and only then that the priests are given permission to do the rite of exorcism onto the child. So the exorcism is first attempted in St. Louis, then the boy returns back to Maryland for a little bit before returning to St. Louis, where it is done again, and this time it is successful. And if this story sounds familiar, it 100% should, because at the time there was an English major going to Georgetown University who read many of these articles. This English major was named William Peter Blatty, and these stories inspired him to go on and write The Exorcist, which was then adapted into an absolutely phenomenal movie that shook up the horror genre as a whole and revolutionized film. Like, it's often regarded as one of the greatest films ever made. With that being said, Blatty had to take a lot of liberties when writing The Exorcist, because he was converting, 5 or 6 paragraphs in a newspaper into a 350-page book. And when the book and movie came out, there were still several members of the clergy who had taken part in these exorcisms that were still alive. And some of them were rather upset with the liberties taken in writing the book and directing the film. And in order to get a full idea of the story, now we're going to fill in some of the details that were left out by these initial newspaper articles. So the reason why Roland Doe bounced back and forth between the Washington, D.C. area and the St. Louis area was because he had family in St. Louis. And apparently one of these family members, an aunt of his, was a spiritualist who believed that she could communicate and talk to ghosts, and had introduced him to the supernatural at a pretty young age. One of the aspects of the supernatural that she introduced this boy to at a fairly young age were Ouija boards. Talking boards, spirit boards. Ouija boards are trademarked by Parker Brothers and I think now Hasbro. But yeah, just in a general sense, the idea of being able to communicate with spirits through the medium of a board with like letters and numbers on it. And the story goes, after his aunt's death, the boy attempted to communicate with her using one of her Ouija boards. And something came through from the other side. One of the details left out of most of the newspaper articles was it wasn't just a scratching sound that was being heard, but eventually scratches would appear on the boy's body, some of these scratches spelling out entire words. And it was actually the scratches on his body that he kept being hospitalized and observed for. At one point when he was in Georgetown University Hospital, the scratching allegedly spelled out Lewis, which informed the family, hey, we should probably seek help somewhere in St. Louis. It was also at Georgetown where a priest named Hughes attempted the first exorcism. Apparently he got permission from a local bishop to do it, but whenever he attempted the exorcism, the story goes that the boy ripped a mattress spring off the hospital bed, stabbing Hughes and cutting him from shoulder to wrist. Hughes did not attempt any more exorcisms after that. And yeah, with that, the family was like, cool, well, we might as well go to St. Louis because the scratching is telling us to, and our son he just committed attempted murder, so why not? And a cousin of the boy was a student at St. Louis University, and he told some of the clergy there about the unusual happenings with his cousin. The clergyman went to visit the boy, and after observing him, went and got permission to start the rites of exorcism on the boy. And during this first exorcism in St. Louis, the boy actually punched one of the priests in the face so hard it broke his nose. This priest was named Halloran, and this wasn't just some normal dude. Later on, Halloran would actually sign up to serve during the Vietnam War as a chaplain, and he didn't like the idea of staying like a rear base and being a chaplain there. So at almost 50, he went through paratrooper training and was a chaplain on the front lines. Like during his tours in Vietnam, he was rewarded 2 Bronze Stars as a chaplain. That is crazy. And this kid just broke his nose. And shortly after this, after several more attempts, they finally were able to perform a successful exorcism, and whatever was possessing this child left. And I should reiterate, allegedly, for everything I just said in this story. Even the experts of the story at St. Louis University claim that there are more than a dozen variants of the story. And that makes sense. There are 2 universities and dozens of towns and suburbs involved in this story. And if you know anything about a good story, college kids and, suburbanite teenagers love to tell stories to each other and change them and adapt them over time. Last year, I did a video on the Green Man of southwestern Pennsylvania and how one man inspired 2 drastically different stories that were connected to an actual individual. So it's easy to see how the story adapted and changed over time. And you might be wondering, well, what about the victim? What about the boy that had to have all these exorcisms done to him? I won't say his name or his address because he passed away, but he went on to live a very successful, normal life by all accounts. He went on to graduate high school. He worked at NASA as an engineer. He even held some of the patents of the ceramic insulators used on the Apollo missions. After his death, RIP, a colleague of his said that he rarely ever talked about this period of his life with anyone out of fear that, people would find out and treat him differently, learning that he was the boy that inspired The Exorcist. And it makes sense. The exorcisms happened when he was like 13 years old, and the book didn't come out till 20 years later. He was like in his mid-30s when the story exploded in popularity. This colleague went on to say that he was so afraid of people finding out that he might have been the boy who inspired the story that he avoided staying at home on Halloween in fear that journalists would show up and, ask him tons of questions about his association with The Exorcist. Which again, I'm just gonna say it here, we don't bully journalists enough and they don't go to heaven. Just like politicians and people who ride bicycles. One last thing to note, it is said that before his death, an anonymous priest showed up and gave this individual his last rites. Just one day, a priest showed up and was like, hey, we heard you were gonna die. Don't worry about it. And just gave him his last rites, which, if true, that's kind of weird because he wasn't a particularly religious person. Like, how did they know? And I know what you're thinking, but doesn't NASA do like super thorough background checks? Wouldn't they not hire someone that was at one point, a demon? Well, this isn't a video on Project Paperclip, but you should Google that. Look into that. See some of the people NASA hired at the end of World War II. Go ahead. Look into it. But anyways, that's a video for another day. What are your thoughts on this case? What are your thoughts on the exorcism of Roland? What other stories of the supernatural, the paranormal should I talk about? What other exorcism stories should I talk about? Let me know down in the comments. But until next time, don't forget to stay wild, stay wonderful, hit that subscribe button if you're still here, and I'll talk to you later.